Great. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Automation Hour, and happy Friday to you all. If you're joining us for the first time, all lines will be muted. Please post any questions that you have out on our Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour, or you can also post them here in the questions area. We will provide the link to the recording sometime after today's session, so we will post that out on our website, automationhour.com, on the Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour, and you'll find it out on our YouTube channel, Salesforce Automation Hour. And if you haven't signed up for our sessions through June, definitely encourage you to do so. We are looking for presenters for the latter half of this year. So if you have a process, a business use case and a process automation solution that you would like to present here on Automation Hour, reach out to me offline and we'll get you to link to our Google's form to submit your presentation idea. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io, for continuing to sponsor us from the very beginning and allows us to bring this free webinar series to you. And here are your co-hosts, myself, David, and Rakesh. We miss seeing you all in person, and hopefully sometime in the near future, we'll be able to see you again. And with that, I'm excited to have Josh Dayment in here today to present on Automation Hour. And let me give you control, Josh, so that you can take this presentation going forward.
All right, sounds good. Let me grab the correct screen. Which screen are you guys seeing right now? Are you guys seeing Salesforce or my desktop?
Your desktop.
Okay, here, let me just go ahead and drag this over.
Yes, now we see Salesforce.
All right, perfect. Wasn't letting me change monitors. Anyways, hey, thanks everybody for joining today, and thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to kind of present some of the stuff that we've done at Recruit Military as far as our automations and things like that. What I'm going to cover today is how you can use Salesforce Flow to create in-app guidance. I'm going to take you through two different ways of doing that. One is via a screen flow, and the other one is actually through a scheduled flow. I had two unique use cases for using in-app guidance and using Flow to build this in-app guidance. For those unfamiliar with in-app guidance, what it is it allows learning prompts in your app to get users' attention. I'm not only using it for learning prompts, but I'm also using it for a type of notification inside of Salesforce. And that's what I'm going to do in these two examples. So how this originated was our marketing team every week sends out to our sales team, was sending out an email, basically just kind of highlighting specific campaigns and things like that marketing was doing for the week. But they're kind of getting some feedback from the sales team saying like, oh, hey, I'm too busy to read the email, so let me just ask you when I want to. So marketing was like, hey, Josh, is there a way that you could just put something in front of their face and make them interact with it? And the first thing that popped in my head was, yeah, in-app guidance. That'd be a perfect way to do it, and I think it'd be a great use case. Let's see what we can do. So I originally took them through, gave a couple people on the marketing team permission to do this via the in-app guidance canvas. This way, but what they quickly found out is that it's a laborious process because we actually have 4 different apps, lightning apps for our sales team. So for those unfamiliar with in-app guidance, when you create a prompt, you have to go into each individual app and each individual landing page that you want to do that for each individual app where you want that prompt to come. So for our use case, so that means every week that a member of our marketing team was going into each app, we do these prompts on our contact record page because that's where a lot of our reps spend a lot of their time. So then they'd have to navigate to a contact page, build the prompt every week. So thought to myself, there's got to be an easy way to do this, right? So usually anytime I think of like there's an easy way to do something, I always think about Salesforce Flow. I'm a huge Flow addict, like love it. So started doing some digging, found the SOAP API guide for what makes up in-app guidance, and it's actually two different things that really our core objects here are going to be the prompt object and then the prompt version. So learned a little bit about what all the fields were around those objects, what's required, so on and so forth, and then a lot of trial and error. And then there's been more trial and error since in-app guidance first came out too. When they introduced walkthrough, that broke my flow, and I'll kind of take you through what that looks like on the break when we get into the flow part too. But that was my initial use case, and then my second use case was from the sales team itself going, hey, one of the sales managers was like, hey, our business model, we do over 100 career fairs every year for military veterans and spouses. So what we wanted was our sales team to follow up with their clients that attended the career fairs for that week every Friday. So once again, thought of flow, thought of a scheduled flow, and to put something right in front of the face of the sales team. So I have a flow every Friday that runs that basically just builds a prompt, puts it on the contact page, and it provides that sales team a link to a report where they can dial down and follow up on their customers that attended their career fairs from this week. And then we've done that in quite a few other places inside of our production org after developing the sandbox to really take in-app guidance, I think, to the next level for us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our two different models of flow. We'll start with a screen flow, and then I'll answer any questions anybody has on the screen flow at the end, and kind of take you through what we have. So in my screen flow here, first thing that we need to do from the user is basically collect what type of information they want inside of in their in-app guidance. So to do this, what I did is I actually opened up the canvas in one screen and kind of look to see like what it all kind of looked like as we move through here. So just like any other Salesforce object, the prompt is going to require a name. So we're grabbing the prompt name. Then we have a date field for start date. Start date is going to be when your prompt begins. So you can build these where it starts today, anytime somebody visits the specific record page that you're putting your prompt on. Or if I want to start this maybe next Tuesday, next Wednesday, I can go ahead and start building that out now. The end date will end the series run of my prompt on that date. And then I have my number of days in between my prompt. And all this information that we're putting into the screen is going to be passed through into a variable into our create step later on. Your prompt header, this is going to be the header that we show onto our prompt. I do have a toggle in here that's asking if you are embedding a video. For this use case, I'm doing a doc prompt, which does support video embed as well. Multi-shim is just a custom component, adds a little bit of padding in between components inside of here. You can find that on Unofficial SFcom. Then just a quick display text, just kind of helping the user along as far as what's happening. So this is also conditional as well. So when we look at this, we say that if the value for is including a video is equal to true, I'm trying to think of that user experience, trying to make sure that they're only being prompted with information that is pertinent at the time. So this is basically just some information as far as like, hey, if I mark this as yes, what does that mean? What's supported and things like that. Then if they do select video, we need a video embed URL. So what that means is so when we look at YouTube as an example, You can't just grab the direct link for that YouTube video. What you need to do is actually go to share the video, and I'll pull up the YouTube video to kind of show you guys what this looks like. You go to share that video, and you click on the embed option, and there's actually a specific URL that you need to use there. And then this is my my rich text input component. This is actually a build on from, I've taken the rich text input component from Unofficial SFcom, and I did a few of my own modifications that I needed for some specific use cases that I have. So that's why I relabeled it as Josh's, just so I can kind of keep the two components separate. But what this does is it allows a user to input rich text, and then we can use that rich text as an output later on downstream in the flow. Next, we have another shim there just to kind of pretty things up. And then I have an option here that lets the users know that they can do an action button. So this means we can add a button to our in-app guidance to where if the user clicks something, it'll take them to a specific URL or someplace within inside of your Salesforce org, depending on the URL prefix that you have in there. And then if you wish to display that action button, yes or no, and then we have a shim. And then every button deserves a label. Got to let people know what they're clicking. So we have our label there. And then this last URL component is going to be where we're directing that action when they click the button. So this is all the user input screen. We'll run this in debug so you guys can kind of see what this looks like translated into an actual screen for your users. Trying to keep it as simple as possible for that user to where it can come and get through. So for this use case for today's demo, what we're doing is we're actually going to create a prompt in two different Lightning apps. So like I said, the things that make up in-app guidance, the main components are going to be your prompt and then your prompt version. So in our prompt, it's really simple. When we create a prompt, we have a developer name. Think of developer name as like an API name. Your language, you can set specific languages for your prompt. So for those that have international business or multi-languages inside your org, you can create different prompts based off of different languages through your flow. And then master label is going to be the label for your prompt. And for me, that's the prompt name that the user is inputting at the beginning. And then for my developer name, I actually have a formula that I'm running because I have a unique naming convention that I want to keep for my own sanity. Because in my production org, I have over 90 prompts, past and present. Because the other great things about in-app guidance is that you can report on user interaction as far as people that clicked it, people that ignored it, so on and so forth. So you get a lot of tracking. So for the marketing use case, when that sales team says, oh yeah, I never saw that, we can actually see if the sales rep acknowledged it or if a sales rep actually just clicked in and ignored it. So once we've created our prompt, the next thing is going to be creating our prompt version. Prompt version, there's a lot more to it. Prompt version, this is where we're kind of getting to the meat and potatoes from all those fields from our very first screen. We're going to get our action button label that we're grabbing from that variable for action button label. Action button link, this is from that URL field. Then we had body. This is actually from the rich text input component that I showed you earlier. I have a manually set variable for body there, and the body is the body of the text that's going to be inside of your prompt. The message you're trying to get across to the end user. The delay in days, is the number of days in between the prompt. Display type. So doc composer means that this is going to be the prompt in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen when you visit a page. This is a tick list, so you can also choose floating prompt. Floating prompt, you'll see when we get into our schedule flow, I'm using a floating prompt there. You actually have another variable we'll have to add here to decide where that prompt is going to be in what quadrant of the screen. So top middle, top right, bottom left, so on and so forth. End date is our end date. Header, like I said, that's the header for our prompt. Is published is true because I wanted these to be published right at the end. You can also publish these as a draft. So if you mark as is published as false, that will require either an admin or user to go back into the in-app guidance canvas to activate the prompt. Master label, once again, I'm using the same label that I have for my prompt in my prompt version, and it's going to be prompt name. And then the parent ID, this is why it's so important to create that prompt first. So every version has to have a parent ID. So this is going to be from that first create prompt step that I have. Next, I have my should display action button, yes or no. And that's going to decide whether or not we're going to show that action button. And then also, other thing that's going to be required here is going to be should ignore global delay. In your in-app guidance settings, you can set a normal global delay for your prompts. I don't have one, so I'm just going to ignore it by marking that as true. Start date is my start date. Your target app developer name, this is going to be which Lightning app your in-app guidance is going to be in. So this is going to be for my Recruit Military Lightning admin, and that's just the API name for my Lightning app here. Target page key 1, what this does is it's telling me which record page I want to display this on. So I'm using the contact. Target page key 2, this can be view or edit. So this means that anytime that a contact page loads and it's a view, I am going to load this prompt into that screen. And then target page type, I'm just using a standard record page. Times to display, this is something that you could have as a variable in the first screen. However, for my use case, I did say that like, hey, we just want to display this 5 times. After it's been displayed 5 times to the rep, we're good to go. And then once again, title for this prompt that's going to show across the top of the Docs Composer prompt is going to be my prompt name. User access, I can say that this is for a specific user. And the same thing for my profiles. Just like in the regular in-app guidance, when I'm building it there, I can designate specific permission sets or specific user profiles are going to be prompted with this very specific profile. Version number, options are 0 or 1, but if you choose 0, your prompt's not going to work. So I'm not 100% sure why that was included in the architecture for the prompt version object. But if you go to the SOAP API guide, it tells you that you have to have a version number of 1. So I'm assuming that's probably just like something for forward-looking development, why that exists. But for now, every version number is always 1 in order for this to work. And then video link is going to be that embed URL that we have. So once that's done, I mean, at this point, I'm ready to go as far as creating prompts. But like I said, I wanted to do this on 2 different apps. So prior to walkthroughs coming out for in-app guidance, the only thing I would have had to have done was just create a bunch of different prompt versions, and I could use the existing create prompt. But after a walkthrough, they actually use the prompt version to create different walkthrough prompts throughout the screen in in-app guidance. So to overcome that, I have to create a different prompt for each app along with each prompt version to go with that prompt because I'm not using walkthrough inside of my org. But for those of you that do have walkthrough, you can use Flow to create different walkthrough prompts using just one prompt and then having multiple versions to take a user through maybe creating a contact like a new user for training or something along those lines. But for me, I'm just doing it across multiple apps. So I just have a different developer name formula for the app, and everything else is going to stay almost exactly the same. So I cheated and I just cloned the components when I built these out. If everything's going to stay the same, and you'll see that every variable that I have here is going to be the same except for my parent ID and then my target app developer name. I'm using a different app that I'm posting this this into. One other thing that we have is an error screen, because what I found the most common error that we did receive in testing in the sandbox with our marketing team as we were developing this was prompt name. Name's got to be unique across each record inside Salesforce, and a lot of times people don't remember that. So I have a formula here, just tells me if my flow fault message contains duplicate value found, there's already a record with its name, please click previous to change the name. That was about 95% of the time, that was the error that I received when we were testing this. So I just went ahead and made my own custom fault message there, so people weren't putting in a ticket every time that there was a fault for something that I knew that 95% chance that I was going to do the error, and it just directs them to try again. I use this in other places. This is a great use case, great way to kind of keep your users inside of the flow when you do these custom formulas to identify most common flow error messages. That way it kind of reduces the total number of tickets that you're getting to, especially for like those new admins. And then once all my prompts are done, I give them a success screen, just kind of saying like, hey, we're good to go, everything's good to go. So let's go ahead and test this. Let's go ahead and create a prompt. And I'll run it in debug so everybody can kind of see on the right-hand side what we're doing. So we saw all of those variables, or I'm sorry, input components and things like that we saw at the very beginning of our flow. So we have our prompt name. So we're going to call this automation hour. We'll start this prompt today. We're going to end it next Friday to the next one. I want to notify my users every 2 days in between my prompt. View last week's automation hour. I am going to embed a video. Let me open up a new tab here and go to YouTube, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we have our automation hour here from 1 week ago with a HOD. So when I talked about getting that embed URL, what we do is we click on share down here, and we're going to click on embed. And then we see that there is a source URL. And it can be a little finicky when you're trying to copy paste. So we're just going to copy the whole thing and we'll clean it up in our flow. Go ahead and paste this. And the only thing we want left is that embed URL. So if you're seeing users that are running into problems, especially with YouTube, it's handy because they actually put embed at the end here. And this ID is actually going to be different from the YouTube ID there, just for reference. So now when you say this is the automation hour from HOD from last week. And then if we want to, we can give them a button, but I'm not going to give a button for this one. I just want people to see the video. So we're going to go ahead and click next. Possum, my prompt is finished. So you can kind of see through in our debug, we gathered all of our input on the very first screen from our user. Then we created a prompt. Then we created a prompt version, and then we created another prompt for our other app, and another version. And then we were good to go. We can finish. So now, if I come back into my in-app guidance list here, and I click on refresh, I have 2 new doc prompts, both of them labeled automation hour. We can see the app that we have in here, the location, everything all the way through there. So let's see what these look like. So we can actually come in here and preview. And there is the prompt. We get this view, last week's automation hour, YouTube video embedded right there, and this is the automation hour from Mohan from last week. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause there to answer any questions that anybody might have on the screen part of building in-app guidance.
All right, so just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can post them out on our Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour or here in the questions within the GoToWebinar. So I got a comment from Rudy, go Trailhead Military.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. And anybody can ask me about Trailhead Military as well. We're happy to answer those questions.
All right, we do have a question from Pankaj. Can you please show again how you use the formula for duplicate prompt names?
Sure. Yeah, so my formula, so here. So each prompt is going to have its own unique dev name. And that's really what was important to me, the label. I'm using the same label across both prompts, just because the label for me is telling me what that prompt is. But when I look at my formulas, what I'm doing, I'm removing some special characters and things like that from API names. But what I'm doing for my dev name is all I'm doing is the prompt name. And then for the admin app, I'm appending it with admin and then the flow current date. And then I'm removing some of the special characters that you can't have in a dev name like spaces and things like that. That's what the substitutes are for. But the thing to remember when you're talking about the dev name is it's just like any other API name. So no crazy special, don't begin with like a number or special characters. Can't use like a / in that dev name, anything like that. It can really be anything that you want. And then you also want to limit it to 80 characters. So I'm not really doing anything too crazy there. It's what fits my business model as far as the dev name. So you don't have to mirror anything that I did specifically.
All right, 2 more questions. Jessica asked, can you repeat the use case for creating your prompt through Flow rather than the typical path of creating prompts?
Sure. So like I said, it was kind of a driver from our marketing team. Our marketing team was creating prompts on 4 different apps. So they're doing it in sales management, sales management alt nav, and then our sales alternate navigation apps. So previously, if I wanted to create even just like the prompt that we just created, I would have had to have gone into the canvas on both of these apps and navigated to a contact page and then recreated each prompt. Compared to when I do it via Flow and do it the way that I did, I can do it all in one shot with just user input on just a single screen. And then on top of that, how we kind of operate is I have a suite of tools down in our utility bar in each of our Salesforce apps that look at the user profile and what they have access to or permissions for user-based session-based permissions. So without having to have the marketing team go into setup and then go to in-app guidance or anything like that, I just dumped it into our suite of tools here called Salesforce Tools. I got to remember where it is in here. It might not be in my app, but marketing team has an option here to create in-app guidance straight from within here, and it launches that screen flow for them to go ahead and do that.
All right, and next question is from Michael, who's my coworker. Is there a place where you can see which users have looked at the prompt, and can you run a report on prompt usage?
Yep, absolutely. So when we come into reports, let's just do a new report. So my dev org only have one contact and not a lot of records. So you actually have a report type of prompts. So when we come to our report for prompts, you can then add in on your filters, you can do, when we look at prompt actions, we can say the active date, the last display date, the name of the prompt, what the user was, the times that they dismissed it, the times it was displayed to that specific user, the type of prompt, times that actions have been taken, all the way through. And for my schedule prompt that I'll show you here in just a second, I actually force feed this report scheduled to the sales managers for that prompt action, so they can kind of see what the sales team is doing as far as their activity goes. So in the sales team, we're directing the sales team, hey, every Friday you have to follow up with your customers that attended the career fair from yesterday. And we're force feeding it so we can see that based off of the activity of like whether or not that the sales team member did that, and then we can say like, and there's no excuses at this point basically, because we have a report that shows, hey, we force fed you the information, it was on you not to do anything with that information. And then you can also take these reports, and I do reports like this in other ways too, where I just want to see like if a prompt is working or making sense, or are user just ignoring it, and then I can start gathering feedback on like why they're ignoring it, or if I can see that, hey, this type of prompt is working really well. So the next prompt that I build, I'll include that in my model as far as, hey, I know this, I know that doc prompts work or don't work for this specific use case and things like that.
And one more question from Kent. Does someone need to validate before activation?
That's up to you. You can do that. So like when we look at my flow, when I create my prompt versions, I'm creating them live. When we say is published on the prompt, you can mark that as false. And what that'll do is it'll still create the prompt, but it'll create the prompt as inactive. So then somebody would have to come into in-app guidance here. You could probably do it via flow. You could actually probably do a flow where you query all of your inactive prompts and then somebody reviews them that way. But I would probably do it this way to verify that, hey, it's displaying how I want it to. If that was the model that I was going to do, yeah. But yeah, you absolutely can. You can just make it as is published equals false. And then somebody could come in here, and instead of this being activated, they would see no checkbox here on in-app guidance, but they could still come in, preview it, and then activate it from the Canvas screen.
All right, that's all the questions we currently have.
Awesome. So next up, so I can do all of these exact same things without actually having a user input from a screen. And that is going to be via a scheduled flow for me. So in my scheduled flow, like I said, every Friday across all 4 of our sales team apps, I wanted a prompt that first thing in the morning showed up as soon as the sales rep logged in, went to a contact to make a call. I wanted them to see something that said, hey, go check out this report, and make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing on Fridays, as designated by sales management. So we'll see it's almost the same thing. However, what I'm doing instead is I'm controlling what information is put into those prompts. And then this prompt is actually going to be a floating prompt. Because when this one was built, the only thing that was being supported was just text in the prompts. Since this flow has been built, you can actually add images inside of floating prompts now as well. And that's something I'm going to actually be exploring over the next couple of weeks, is how I can add those images inside Flow, and also create an asset file for those images, because they have to be an asset file. And anybody that's ever worked with files inside of Flow, it can be a little bit of a daunting task sometimes. But that's next on my plate. But for today, these ones are just going to be displaying text and giving a user an option to deny or accept the action that we're going to do in our prompt. So same thing, just like before. We have our developer name for the specific prompt that's going to be on a specific app, our language, and then our master label. And you can ignore my spelling mistake of missing the T on prompt there, but I'm usually the only one looking at this, so my spelling teacher from elementary schools can scold me later. So for each prompt, we're going to create a prompt version. When we look at our prompt version, this one is a little bit different from what we saw inside of our screen flow. So I'm actually adding a hard-coded label and links here. I did update this to just kind of point to something different that we'll see here in a minute. So we have our action button label for my normal use cases taking me to my clients. And what that does is actually I'm redirecting them to a report inside Salesforce that has a list of all of their clients that attended a career fair yesterday. The body, I'm just telling them, hey, what this prompt is for. Just a reminder, hey, follow up with your clients who attended yesterday. And then delaying days, I want to show this every day until that user does the action that I want them to do. Dismiss button label. Dismiss button is basically something that I'm going to capture for them to get rid of the prompt, and is telling me that they're going to ignore it. So they're saying ignore. And like I said, this is going to be a floating panel. So we actually have another option here for display position. This is useful because this is a pick list on the prompt. So you can choose where you are going to be putting your prompt, what part of the screen, like I said, what quadrant. So I want it top, center, right in the middle of their face. That's where I want this prompt to show. End date formula, I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. But this is basically just a formula that I'm using based off of the time that the prompt is created and when I want this to end. So usually for me, for these ones, it's usually about a week. And this one was just a set it and forget it. I've had this same flow running every Friday since I want to say the middle of November. And it works every week without a problem. Once again, we have our header, follow up with job fair clients, is published true, and then our prompt name. And then once again, very important here, our parent ID has to be the ID from the prompt that we created prior to creating the version. Should display action button. Yes, I want to display the action button because I wanted to redirect them from that action button to the report that I want them to follow up on. Then we have our should ignore a global delay, which is true. Our start date is going to be the current date. Target app developer name. Once again, that's the Lightning app API name that I want to display this prompt in. And then I am using the contact. I'm doing it when they view a contact for the first time that day on a standard record page. What's unique about this one also is that I'm adding some color saturation. This came out with the last release of in-app guidance to allow you to do specific colors for your prompts. So for me, you can choose 3 different themes based off of your org styling themes. So I'm doing theme 1, and then I'm also doing saturation because my record pages all have a light colored background. So by making a dark colored saturation, think of it as dark mode on your phone, except for this is just dark mode for that prompt. So it really makes that prompt stick out. And then I'm going to display it 5 times until they do something with it. And then our title is this is post job fair follow-up. I'm going to display this to everybody that accesses these apps. And once again, version number always has to be set to 1. So as we move through, we see that I'm just over and over creating prompts and then creating a version each way through this. And then, so like I said, my end date formula, what that looks like is it's the flow current date plus 3. So basically, I'm going to show this to them on Friday. they do something the way I'm going to give them through Monday to do it, and on Tuesday, they're not going to ever see this prompt again. One thing to note here is when you do this, when you do something scheduled, I find that it's best practice to go through and anything that becomes old and stale and the data is no longer relevant, I go ahead and archive that data. So I'll get rid of like prompts from like 3 months ago, as an example, because I'm only running these prompts for a 3-day time period. Over time, the number starts to grow as far as your list is that you have for in-app guidance. So like I said, this is a schedule flow, but we can go ahead and click on debug on schedule flow. And this will go ahead and create all of those prompts. Oh, I got a duplicate value because I already ran this today. But see, 95% of the time, that's the problem, duplicate value. And that's because I did work on my demo yesterday and I scheduled these 4 to run this morning. So we know that my schedule worked and created those prompts. But what does it look like? This is going to be exactly the same. So if we come to preview here, boom. So we get the nice dark color in the background. It opens up the prompt. I can ignore it. I can also set a snooze. This is something that came out in the last release, and it's funny that it came out because this is something that a lot of my users asked about too, is they love the prompt because there's a nice reminder for them outside of the normal like notifications. Because if you're a real active person in Salesforce and a lot of tasks, follows, and things like that, this bell up here can become overwhelming, but the prompt really kind of sticks out in their face like, oh crap, I got to do this. But here it allows the user to snooze it. They can ignore it. They're not going to see it again for the rest of the day. But if they click on take me to their clients, normally that would take them to a report. But for me, well, in this one, it is going to take me to the report. I thought I changed that, but so it takes me to exhibitors this week by owner. So I have this schedule to run every Friday. It comes out doing that, and then we actually have a couple other flows that are doing the same thing for some different teams. That is just prompting the user to take a specific action, and that action button, which is what's awesome about it, is that you can actually run another subflow off of that action button too, and that's what we're doing with the prompt that we're building right now. Is that we actually have that action button launching another flow that's displaying a list of records that a users need to take action with, which is pretty cool. And maybe I'll do a blog post or something like that about that later, but that's in development right now, but our initial testing is pretty awesome. So that's their scheduled. You can also create prompts through Apex as well. So if developers out there, you can create them via Apex actions or Apex classes and triggers, create prompts that way. But those are just a couple of different use cases that we have. Like I said, those are continuously growing, and then some exciting stuff coming with in-app guidance this in the summer release for those that have a pre-release org already. I know a lot of them were updated over this last week, and I took a little bit of a dive in there on the pre-release org, and I saw that they're going to introduce targeted prompts, so you can decide, like, you can target specific sections of a Lightning page with a prompt. So I will be digging into how I can use that inside Flow when I create those prompts as well. But I'll kind of stop there for any questions anybody has about schedule flow, in-app guidance, or just in-app guidance in general.
All right. Okay, we have a question from Stuart. I have a question based on the display position. Can you control the tab order of fields in a flow? Meaning I can set the order of the fields that I want to type in, or which order inside of a flow screen.
I'm not sure I understand the question. A prompt, something to remember about a prompt is it's not a screen. So like when we look at our prompt, this isn't an actual flow. This is This is a prompt record that gets loaded when we load the screen via in-app guidance. So we have our prompt name, our prompt header, and then the body of the prompt. Those are the main things that we look at when we look inside of our prompt. As far as your flow screen goes, if you're new to flow, yeah, you can display the input to your flow screen in any order that you want. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great, Stuart, if you could let us know if it did. I actually sent a unmute request, so if you want to ask your question live or clarify, that's great.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. I could clarify.
I can.
You can put your fields on the screen, and it was more about flow in general. Sure. But the question was more about tab order of entering fields if you're a keyboard monkey like me, and you like to be able to type in tab, type in tab, and be able to control either rows or columns of how you're going through the screen. I know you can control on a page layout your tab control, and you can do it on a lightning component. You can control the tab order of first this field, then that field, then that field. But I'm not sure if you can do that in a flow screen.
Yeah, in your flow screen, if you're looking for like keyboard shortcuts, you're somewhat limited. But like if I run this flow, like let's go ahead and run it. So anytime that I click tab, this is going to take me through each of my tab, but I can't designate that, but I can control what order these are in my flow screen. So you're asking? So let's say I want to put start date first. I could just, all I got to do in my flow is I just drag start date up to the top there.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks. No, this is really great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stuart. We have a question from Pankaj. Are there any limits on scheduled flows, i.e. how many can be active consecutively?
So something you're going to want to remember when we're talking about like the number of prompts and prompt versions that we're creating, like mine, it's probably bad practice to show it. I did, those should actually each be an assignment element, and then do a fast create at the end of the flow. But for me, it was just something, I'm only doing 4 of them, so I wasn't sweating it too much, and I just wanted to copy paste, and it was being lazy. So you're always going to have the normal limits that you're going to have when we talk about like Apex CPU limits, and things like that, depending on other automations that you have. I don't know off the top of my head if there is a total number of prompts that you can have inside of your org. I haven't hit any limits yet from experience, and I've done well over 100. So my suggestion there would be to try to break it. That's usually what I do in Flow. I push it to the limit and try to break it.
All right, just a reminder to folks, if you have any questions for Josh on what he presented so far or any general process automation, you can post your questions now. Let me just hop over to the Trailblazer community, see if there's anything there. So while we give folks a couple minutes for any last minute questions, I'm always interested in how people started their automation journey. So Josh, can you share how you got into Flow?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually got to share this on Transform with Platform a couple weeks ago. The very first flow that I built was built in the classic flow designer, and it was after I first became an admin. I thought I have this awesome idea of, hey, we have all of these duplicate contacts inside of our Salesforce org. So one Friday night, I ran a duplicate job using a third-party tool that was supposed to only identify them and not merge them until I was able to review it. However, that third-party tool merged over 150,000 contacts. So it was actually me that merged 150,000 contacts, but we're always going to blame the third-party tool because admins are perfect. Painstakingly had to unmerge all of those contacts, basically restore all the contacts from the recycle bin. But what that does is when we merge records, it reparented a ton of opportunities and tasks and historic data from those specific contacts. So once we got everything cleaned up as far as identifying the contacts that we need to restore, what came next was all the opportunities, which we just did via data loader, wasn't a big deal, but tasks was a whole other animal. There's just so many to go through and to find out if it was or wasn't the right contact and so on and so forth. We eventually got most of it cleaned up, but there's always going to be the handful that I missed. So what was happening prior to this, being a brand new admin, didn't really know a lot about Flow, didn't really know a lot about automations, anything like that, being scared, intimidated about all of this. I was going through, getting a ticket going, hey, this guy's tasks are still messed up. So I was going in and reassigning them all manually as they came into the ticket system, as they were being identified by users. But then our Senior Vice President of Enterprise Systems, my boss, is like, hey, why don't you just build a flow so where you can just simply select the contact, then select the new contact that you're going to reparent those tasks. And he showed me how to build it all. And you see here in the utility bar in this dev org, I actually still have that flow. I've never touched it from the first time that I did it. So this is old school, like it's literally like querying a record by name. So what I'm doing is I put in the contact's name, and then what it does is it actually returns a choice here. And this is normally if there's a bunch of them of IDs. So I would have this open in a Salesforce screen, and I would say, okay, this is the contact ID you want to go from, and then in the next screen it tells me which one is going to go to. And it would reparent all of those tasks. So it just saved me, instead of going through 20, 30 tasks, I'd have to move. I could just select the ID that I wanted, move them to where I needed to go. That was my first introduction to Flow, and it just kind of took off from there. And I love Flow, do a lot with it now.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah. So it was a mess up that's what brought me down the Flow path. So. But as a reminder, of where you were and where you are now. Like I said, where I am now, I'm building stuff like this.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
All right, we have one question from Jason. Opinion question. What is the trickiest part or step to someone newer in the automation journey?
The trickiest thing, I think, is understanding the use case, and then it's always going to be intimidation. Like, people get in there, and I think a lot of people get intimidated by things like loops or assignments, when to use Flow versus which tool to use. Whether you're going to use a workflow rule, if you're using a process builder, if you're using an Apex trigger, if you're using Flow. But what I tell people now, when we start having those conversations, is use Flow. You'll see it in a lot of the different blogs, a lot of posts, a lot of conversations, YouTube videos, everything. And even in the release notes, if you read the release notes over like the last 4 or 5 different releases, you'll see how it's progressively going, hey, we've added this functionality from Apex or from workflow rule or from process builder to Flow. So Salesforce is kind of guiding you down that path already. And for you, especially as a new person, I tell people to start building it in Flow, because that's just where you're going to end up eventually.
Yeah, Flow Builder is the end state declarative automation tool. So eventually workflow rules and process builder will go away.
Yep.
Um,
And then
one
don't be
thing,
afraid to ask questions either. That's the other thing that I always try to remind people. There's so many people out there willing to help you. I have people ping me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Slack, like, ask. So many people are willing to help.
Another piece of advice I give to people who are new to automation is to write down in a process map whatever process you're trying to automate, and really just capture it on paper. Make sure you sit down with the business stakeholder and make sure you've accurately captured all the steps, manual decision points that people do in their head, and do all that, get alignment before you actually go into Salesforce and put hands on keyboard, because you want to get that alignment before you built it and then find out that that's not what they actually do, and then you have to redo the work, right?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Us as a business, we actually have like before we start building anything, we have what's called a company project, where we bring in all of the stakeholders around that specific automation conversation, identify what the pain points are of the current process, if there is one, and then discuss like what Right's going to look like coming out of it before we start anything. And that's actually all collected via Salesforce tools here, and I actually have a project request that's a flow that users put in.
Cool. All right, we have a question from Pankaj. Do you code in Apex as well, or are you only working in config tools?
Yep. So for me, I do the most of my work in config tools. I do dabble a little bit in dev work via Apex, and then I actually have built a few custom Lightning Web Components. A couple of those you can actually find on Unofficial SFcom. Just recently released a new improved file upload screen that I was involved with the FlexCard Flow component from Unofficial SFcom as well. I also have a carousel component there too.
So Unofficial SFcom is a website that is unofficially managed by the Salesforce product management automation team, but there are a lot of components that are built by the community, just like Josh, where you could boost up the capabilities of out-of-the-box flow and install it in your org. So if you haven't gone out there, I definitely recommend that you do. There's a lot of blog posts, great blog posts, and cool things that you can install to work with Flow. And as a follow-up question, what I keep hearing is flows are difficult to debug as they become more complex. Is that true?
I don't think so. My personal opinion is that is a false statement. I think that if I'm trying to debug something that somebody else built, yeah, I might struggle with it at first. But once you understand the logic behind what's happening inside of debug, it becomes a lot easier. Especially like over the last release when the product team from Flow introduced the hyperlinks directly to show you in the Apex exception emails what part of your flow broke. I think that was a big game changer from the last release. But when you start building out and we start looking through the debug, it's going to break up into the section by section what's happening inside your flow. And for me, when I'm building a screen flow, or if I'm building an auto launch flow now in a sandbox and an auto launch flow, I'll debug on Canvas, which shows me the path that everything followed, which is huge too. Debug, I think you just need to understand what your API names are inside your flow. That's why naming conventions are so important. as well as when you're using a test record, if you're querying something in a test record, you understand what's already existing on that record. So you can say like, okay, I see in my first element of my flow, I always break it down by element of flow. I'll break down like, okay, screen one, okay, I saw where all of my inputs were put there. And then if something fails in my testing, I can see like what failed, and then I go back through my debug. And it can get long and daunting for large flows, but that's what Control F is for. Once you get your error message, you type in the API name for that field, for that formula, for that variable, and then you find out where that's all being referenced in your flow. And then you can kind of start seeing where it's failing or where it's not doing what you expect. I think it just takes a little bit of getting used to and just knowing where to look.
I would say debugging flows, it's much easier to follow along than having to debug Process Builder.
100%. Yep.
Try to figure that one out.
Yeah. I get
rule 1A, rule 1B.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why like I get excited anytime I get to convert a process builder into a flow for that very specific reason, is because when I get that Apex exception email, I can go, okay, flow name, and then, okay, yeah, oh, that's where I messed up, or this is where it's messing up, or what's wrong, and I can fix it on the fly. Right. Process builder, yeah, that's, talk to me about 3 days after I figure out what's wrong. Right. All right, well, we could go on and on and on and talk about automation all day, but I realize that we're actually over in time. And we don't have any more questions. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Josh, for presenting. This is really cool stuff that you did with in-app prompts using Flow. Definitely very creative. And please come back again and present. Yeah. We look forward to having you back. Absolutely. I'm excited for the next time. Just got to figure out what unique option we're going to just talk about next time. Cool. All right, and with that, we're going to end this call. Please be on the lookout for the recording sometime after today's session. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.